Chapter 3.1 Prehistoric and Ancient Mediterranean Artworks. This is the first chapter covering the art history section of your textbook. Make sure you look at your study guide vocab and the artworks that I want you to know roughly what time period. So let's go ahead and look at where we would be on the map. We're the southern portion of Europe and then the northern part of Africa along the Mediterranean. A lot of these artworks initially were about survival. In this case, you could see, and these are kind of interesting silhouettes of one's handprints. These caves are well known for seeing illustrations of cattle or some sort of animal that they probably would have hunted. Sometimes you see figures like the woman of Windledorf, which is actually in part 4, but on page 469. But in this case, I wanted to put it in for us so that you could see this is just a really well-known example for prehistoric sculpture. But they also named her Athena or Venus. It was Venus, that's right. And Venus because of fertility, and you think of the goddess of love and fertility. So it's just kind of a fun name to put on her. But most know her as a woman from Windledorf. And we believe, like historians and archaeologists, that because her breasts are large and her abdomen is large, that maybe she was pregnant, or maybe this was a figure to help one to become pregnant. We really don't know, but that's kind of what we could put together. Now let's look at the Mesopotamian empires. These are all within this idea of prehistoric artworks. This is the first one I want to focus on, is the Ziggurat of Ur. It's basically a mountain, a man-made mountain, but it's also a temple. Hundreds of steps leading up towards it. I have a lot of images with it, so I'm going to keep moving. In its prime, you could see it in that top image off to the right. This is an illustration of what it would have looked like in Ur. This is the Sumerians. And then beneath, you can see what it looked like as far as in ruins before Saddam Hussein kind of repaired it, which he did repair it to this view. So this is not how it would look naturally at this point. Okay, so the head of the Akkadian ruler, so this is not Sumerian, this is, like it says, Akkadian. Notice that there's not a lot of distinctions that make him unique from others. If we saw a list of these sculptures of various people, they would look very similar if they were at the same reign of power. It had the same authority of power, I mean. So it's not like we see anything too unique. The eyes are probably gouged out because of thieves. They might have used a precious stone to actually make the eye. But look at how symmetrical from the front, the design on the beard is, and even how triangular, which we're going to see this when we talk about Africa later, the nose, the mouth, even the eye shapes, for what you can see left of it, would have appeared. Okay, so let me see. We're going to go to this one, the Ishtar Gate from Babylon. So here's an illustration in the top left of what the Empire of Babylon, this is the main entrance gate, which was supposed to be somewhat intimidating for anyone that was coming to visit. And on the bottom right, this is what you would see in your book. This is a reconstruction that archaeologists, painfully put pieces, tiny, tiny pieces together to make it. And it was just, anyway, they shipped all the small pieces and then assembled it and built it. Again, I'm sure they had to add things to it because they probably couldn't find every piece, but it's reconstructed in this museum in Germany. And it has kind of these really beautiful creatures. I was hoping I had a detail of it, but this horse, like what looks like a unicorn. The blue was just a semi-precious stone, really beautiful in person as well as just even in a photograph. But you would notice that as a wealthy nation if they had this. A lot of people think of Babylon. They think of the Tower of Babel, and some even say the Ziggurat of Ur could have been that. But I mean, I really don't know. People just say things sometimes. But I'm just going with what we do know, the best we do. But if you look at the bottom right, based on actual writings, there's written descriptions of the hanging gardens in when Nebuchadnezzar was in reign, that he had built for his wife. And this is just an artist's rendering of what it would have looked like, but there's no physical fact other than the fact that, I mean, like as far as ruins go, but there is just that there's a description of these hanging gardens. Okay, so now Egypt. Y'all familiar with the pyramids of Egypt? That's where the Pharaoh, who was their ruler, who considered himself to be a god, that's where he was mummified and his remains were located. Kefrith with the falcon god Horus. You can see the falcon really well in the side profile view, and then I have a close-up, and then you can't really see him in the third view, but remember with the Akkadian face, like there was this really strong geometric angular quality in those facial features, and you see that here. Very proportional. If you remember, Egyptians measured by the width of one's palm to get them proportional. Here is just, I don't even know if this is in your book or not, but I really like this one, so I just brought it out because it's rare that you would ever see a woman treated to almost equality of a man. And here is a different pharaoh, but he and his wife still have kind of those angular characteristics in the facial features and body, though hers are a little bit more soft and curved. But it's just showing you on the left side how many palms high that he would be. And then on the right, I want you to look at how she has her arms around him. So there's this idea of affection, which was really unique for that time period. And he has his foot forward, which is a sign of authority and rulership, and hers is somewhat. She is a little bit behind him, but he almost had his queen represented as his equal, which again is uncanny. The canopic jars are where their remains or things that they might would supposedly eat in their afterlife. That's what they would put it in. There's the hieroglyphs on the outside, I guess, identifying it. And there's different deities who are, their heads are represented on the top of the jar. But I believe it is mostly body organs that would have been put there. Okay, so next I want to talk to you about the fouling scene. It's in what's called a twisted perspective, and that's just because if you look at the shoulders and if you look at the hips, they're facing different directions. The shoulders are facing towards you, and so they're in the front view, but the hips are turned, or rather twisted around, so they're on profile view. So if you look over at the head on the left, the woman is in frontal view when we can see both eyes, but when we see only one eye, she's in what's called a profile. So we've got frontal and profile. So look at the eyes of the Egyptians. They are also in the frontal, but the eyes are, but the face itself is in a profile view. So that's why they call it twisted perspective. If you really stood up and then tried to move your body so it was positioned the same way, you'd see you're twisting your body. So that might also help you. Ancient Greece. So this is where we start to get into some of the classical look. We have the famous Parthenon, which is in the city of Athens. It was built for Athena. I've talked about this a little bit with the golden section as far as the front of it, but very balanced. There's a really beautiful relief that tells a military victory, which you think of Athena, she was the goddess of war. The battle was between the Lapiths, who were supposed to represent the people that were of Athens, and the Centaurs, which are part animal, and that was to represent the barbaric tribes coming in to attack. Here are some stylistic changes. So right here, where we are right now, is the archaic to the classical. And then moving forward, you'll see there's the Hellenistic. So notice the figures look very stiff and angular and just not as natural in the archaic, and definitely no emotions. And then in classical, we're still not seeing a lot of emotions, but the body is relaxed. This is in what's known as the contrapposto pose, or the S curve. So he's relaxed on one hip. There's a better understanding of the muscles and how they sit on our skeleton frame, and I would say the proportions have improved. And then on the far right, now we really have a good grasp on like how the body can twist and the muscles, how they would look. And we have emotions. Their father has anguish on his face. He's trying to save his sons from the serpent. So here's the contrapposto pose. This is really a reproduction, a Roman copy of a Greek sculpture of Venus, which the Greeks would have painted flesh tones and made her look like a real person, and I think they even dressed some of their statues. But anyway, the example there to the right just shows you how when they're resting on one side, it's supposed to appear more natural, and that will stay in from the Greeks to the Roman Empire to when we get into the Renaissance. You'll see the classical contrapposto pose. Okay, so the Etruscans, they had tufa, which was a volcanic rock. It was really easy to carve into, and so they would have these underground burial homes, basically, like they were houses kind of similar to what they would live on above ground. And then they would have a sarcophagi, or sarcophagus, one singular, one's plural. And this one is made from terracotta, and it's the couple, and very affectionate. They're both smiling. I think this is made in 4 sections, and then it was compiled together. Anyway, so that was a common tradition amongst the Etruscans, but very lifelike. But it's looks, if we go back to these, it looks a little bit more towards the archaic than to me in the classical. Okay, we are going to move to this one, the Arch of Constantine. So this is right towards the end, the last of the chapter. Constantine had this as a triumphal arch, so that means like it was to reveal his power, authority, and victories of different various wars or peace treaties and things like that. So that it's full of symbolism and reliefs. And I have one detail over to the right. He considered himself to be like the deity Apollo, and in the image there you could see where they were making sacrifices to that deity, and then Constantine is standing there on the other side. But just really beautiful. There's more than just Constantine's arch. There's also the Arch of Titus. But this one in particular, he took sculptures from, like, broke them off of other walls, or if they were sculpture, added them into this arch. So it actually represents centuries of different artists and that have all just forcefully been put together on one arch, which for an art historian, I'm sure that makes this very complex work to discuss. Constantine at one point had a full, huge sculpture of himself. And this is all that remains. This looks like a painting to me, but it's actual photograph of a museum. You can walk into it and see what's left of his sculpture. Okay, we're going to stop there.